Man, I'm excited. I'm excited for it. So who we have on the call is we have the top 20% in our 3 market centers. We've got about 500 agents across 3 market centers. We invited the top 20%. A lot of them are getting back to work right now. So we're actually going to record it and send it out to everybody. So we appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure, Caleb. I'm ready to rock and roll whenever you are, bud.
Cool. All right. So everybody, this is David Osborn. David is fueled by freedom. I think I read that on his website. I've got to know David a little bit over the last year. And I've had a man crush on David ever since he wrote this book.
Amen, brother. There it is.
There you go. There you go. Wealth Can't Wait. And then he wrote this one, Tribe of Millionaires. And those of you who hang out till the end of the call, we got some cool gifts for you. But he's an author. You were an OP. You're an investor in 5 regions. You also, if I have this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you own nine offices or are involved in 9 offices.
Yeah, I think it's 12. Okay. Basically, we have 5,000 agents. We sell $12 billion a year. I have a partner. He's the OP of most of them. He's the CEO. I'm the chairman. We're 50-50. And the only OP position I have left is Memphis, which ironically, we had our record-breaking month in April, our largest ever company dollar month, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, good for you with everything going on.
I know, it's crazy.
So can you take us back a little bit? What I'm hoping the people on this call will get, I mean, these are top producers, so they're used to making good commissions, and then I want them all to start investing, continue investing, growing their wealth, funding freedom. Can you, I guess, tell us your story a little bit of how you got started? I think you were backpacking in your later.
Yeah, I mean, we can go a lot of different ways, Caleb, but I would start with a learning point because I love top producers. I've been around them my whole life. My mom is a realtor. I was around Gary Keller at age 15, 16 when I had a lawn mowing company, cutting yards. And the thing realtors sometimes misunderstand, and like I said, I love realtors, been around them forever, amazingly impressive humans with the amount of money they can generate. But the thing they sometimes misunderstand is that income is not wealth. Income is not wealth. And so you can make $1 million a year and be dead broke. Doctors are a perfect example of that, but you go away from doctors and you just go to humans in general. Most people can't get to $1 million. That's what's so amazing about real estate agents, or 300,000 or 400,000 or 250,000. Pick a number. The exceptional top producers in our business do amazingly well relative to society as a whole and the world as a whole, because the top 1% worldwide is $30,000. So you already have to get an impression on how lucky we are to be in America, how lucky we are. I got a phone call. Let me delete that. Hopefully I pop back. There I am. How lucky we are to be in America, how lucky we are to be in our industry, how lucky we are to have the talents we have, the skills we have, because we're able to make this money. But income is not wealth, and it's irrelevant really how much money you make in the long run. It might look good short term. You might bloom like a summer flower or have great big feathers like a peacock, but today a peacock, tomorrow a feather duster. And when you are a feather duster, you want to make sure you've accumulated wealth so you can still live an amazing life. And that wealth is different from the income. So, my story is military brat, used to traveling, and got to America at age 14. I almost consider myself an immigrant. My mom's an English person, and I was raised overseas till I was 14. My dad's from San Antonio. He retired back to Austin. And then I got into cutting yards. I started construction. I had a lawn mowing company. I had 3 trucks working for me when I was 17, netted $20,000, which I thought was a ton of money. I didn't know how to pay taxes back then, so I'm sure I wasn't paying taxes. I don't even know if 20,000 was tax-free, but so I felt wealthy. And then I bought a truck and a computer. They both completely depreciated all that supposed wealth. Got out of college barely. Terrible student. Got thrown out of a few high schools. Part of that was just the motion. I was used to motion and movement, and so because of all, I had my mom print this out for me the other day because I was curious. I moved 10 times by the time I was 14. So you can imagine the sense of movement I had in my life. It wasn't easy for me to sit still. It wasn't easy for me to sit in classrooms. And I was expected to be uprooting and moving pretty quickly. Got out of college with a 2.3 GPA. I was a terrible student and I wished I was better, but I wasn't. So that's just the way it was. That's the way. So then I got into a computer sales company. I was their top salesman most months. There was another girl that was pretty good too. We'd go back and forth. After 1 year of that, it was just a beating. It was a very low cultural fit for me, that company, for a number of reasons, which I won't go into right now. I decided to quit the job and go hitchhiking around the world. So I hitchhiked around the world for what was supposed to be 1 year, but became 2 years and 3 months, living on $20 a day. And I came back from that and I was dead broke. In fact, I had minus 1,500 net worth. My credit card was run up. My dad had to buy me a ticket home. He'd promised me, if you ever get stuck out there, I'll buy you a ticket home. So I took him up on it. And my family was middle class. So we weren't poor, but we weren't rich. I mean, we grew up on military pay, which wasn't a lot back then. And my mom had gotten into real estate with this small company called Keller Williams. And she said, why don't you come work for me? And I said, well, I'll come work for you while I look for a real job. And drove around a buddy from college, collected $5,000 and thought, wait, maybe this is a great job to have. So I loved it. I fell in love with real estate, sold for 3 years. My mom was already established. Together, we became the #1 team in Keller Williams. Keep in mind, at that time, there's probably 1,000 agents, not 180,000. So it was a lot easier. And our production, I think, was 750,000 GCI gross. So it wasn't that big a deal. But the one thing about my mom is she always ran a tight ship. She's kind of old school, no college degree, but grew up in World War II. So we didn't spend a lot. We netted like 450 on 750. That was just the way we did it. Got into, after 3 years, I was kind of ready for something else. And Gary Keller and Mo Anderson have been pouring into me like they pour into everybody. And, so Mo said, hey, why don't you go up to North Texas, New Mexico region? My folks had bought the region, but it wasn't going that well. It was at risk of loss, I think. And so I went up to North Texas, New Mexico, and I started selling franchises. And honestly, I wasn't very good at selling franchises, Caleb. I was not credible. I guess I was 27. And I was good at getting people excited. I was good at making the pitch. I just wasn't good at finding the OP who would take the risk and close on the franchise. And because I kept having pools of agents, I kind of put together ownership groups and I kept launching them with myself as the OP. I was pretty poor OP at first, but fortunately back then the company didn't have the training, education, and standards they have today. So I was able to slide into multiple OP roles. Again, it wasn't really my plan. At that time, I'd rather have sold them, but I just couldn't find that OP candidate willing to step up and take the risk. And one thing I was very comfortable with was risk. Again, I'm 28, 29 years old now, and I've hitchhiked around the world. So clearly I have a propensity towards risk. My dad was a Green Beret colonel. Maybe that's part of it too. So I just went all in and I bought as many franchises as I couldn't sell. And as time went by, I built more franchises, but I also got better at selling them and I failed forward. So I learned how to operate them better, had an identity crisis at 30, 31, which really reset my whole personality into a more effective business person. And went on to build the largest Keller Williams group of franchises in the country. So I have 12, we do 12 billion a year and about 5,000 agents. And I got a great partner in Smokey Garrett, who runs it for us. He's the CEO. And then I also bought master franchises. Keller Williams was expanding at the time. And, again, you guys think it looks, there's always a little bit of luck in life and it always looks like, but you got to realize that back then, no one wanted these things. When I joined Keller Williams, it was the model wasn't succeeding at the level it is today. It wasn't a dominant force. And even the regions, the people that bought them, there was a whole cycle of people that bought, failed. And then we kind of figured it out. Gary got the training going and the education. They got the model right. And that's when it blew up. So the reason so I have 5 master franchises really is a credit to more my aggressiveness and my willingness to move forward than necessarily a great strategic play that I thought these were the gold of the future. I was just all in for what I was doing. So all of that built. I actually sold one of my regions recently, so I'm down to 4 now. So that built, and then the crash came of 2008. My dad got cancer and died at the same time. 2008 was a scary time. My revenue went down by 60%. My expenses stayed almost the same. As you know, when you own a business, you're kind of attached to it. I always tell my managers, look, if the ship sinks, you get to jump off and find another job. I go down with the ship because I got leases and I got copiers and phone systems and I'm on the hook for all of them. And, it stabilized around 2009, halfway through 2009. And I was like, wow, check this out. I've been investing in rental property along the way, but I went big around 2009, 2010. 2009, I was like, we're still alive. We're making some money. That's really, really good. And then 2010, I started investing late 2009, 2010. And then 2011, I went really hard in. And then 2012, I remember analyzing 3 deals and saying, my CFO at the time was like, which one should we do? And I was like, we should do all of them. We just don't have enough money. So went crazy, invested heavy. And then the economy shot back, as you know. And when it shot back, all these assets I'd bought and then all my existing Keller Williams stuff both came back up. And that's really where my life entered a new world of financial freedom. But yes, you mentioned at the beginning, freedom's always what drove me. And I felt like wealth was the best way to freedom. And so I was always incredibly interested in how do I get wealthy? How do I get financially free and not have to report to anyone? Part of that might have come from a military dad who was pretty strict growing up. Part of it might come from traveling so much and not feeling a sense of stability in my youth. Bottom line is the net result of that is I'm a financially free guy today. And that's where the book came along, was like, as my dad was dying, I was thinking, well, what could I contribute to the world? He's taking so many cool stories with him. He was a great storyteller, military stories, war stories, fun stories, like the time he had to throw 2 Australians in the brig because one of them was holding down a cobra in Vietnam and the other one was about to jump on it. And they'd had a bet that the falling body was faster than the strike of a cobra. So like my dad had all these cool stories of the Aussies and how tough they were and the different people he dealt with. And I knew that he was going to take a lot of them with him and I wouldn't remember him. So I thought, well, maybe if I wrote a book, if I got hit by a car, my kids would have something to remember me by. And it may not be funny stories, but it'll be how to escape the rat race and be financially free. And that was Wealth Can't Wait. I'm proud of this book. It actually took us 7 years to write it. It was much hard. You know, if you're a C student, it's not like you're naturally inclined to sit down and just grind paperwork and then review that same paperwork. But after about 14 re-edits from the great editors and a lot of work, it came out to be a really good book. Probably too much information in one book. Should have been probably 5 books, but really if you pick it up and read it, you know, I get a lot of real positive feedback from it and I'm real pleased with it. Now the second book took 7 months. And that's because I figured out how to do it. I got smarter and I hired a ghostwriter, which is a way easier way to do it.
Sure. Yeah, for Tribe of Millionaires, you guys, those of you who have not read it, I highly recommend it because it's a parable about a guy who shows up at his father's funeral and he hadn't talked to him in 20 years. And it turns out that the father that he knew had this will for him, and the father that he left was not essentially the father that at his funeral, the people that were around him, he was shocked by who's with him and who's around him. And he realized that he might not have known his dad as well as he thought. And it goes on this really great journey and a lot of really good tips and things in there for building wealth and just overall as a being. So it's really good. I'd really advise people to read it. All right.
Thanks,
you had talked a little bit about income is not wealth. I'd like you to dive a little bit deeper on that. I'd like to get your thoughts go a little bit deeper on that because you say it because you just know it, but break that down for us a little bit better, please.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a single billionaire on the Forbes 500 list or whatever it is, 5,000, whatever the list is up to nowadays, that doesn't have $1 billion worth of wealth. It's not the 500 billionaire income list, right? And you just see this so much, and I saw it my whole life. Now, it probably helped that my mom was frugal. My dad was a spender, but my mom grew up in World War II. She was tight with money. And when I ran businesses, Gary Keller's tight with money. So Mo Anderson was tight. And so all my mentors, Mark Willis was kind of a spender. So my mentors were bifurcated, but the ones that really seemed to, you know, have the longest depth of business experience ran a tight ship. And I would look around me and I would see, you know, you study The Richest Man in Babylon, you listen to Cash Flow Quadrant, and you begin to realize, right, what is financial freedom? Well, financial freedom is money coming in without you having to work. Now, there's a secondary view of it, which could be you could have a giant capital pool that you live off of. That's different. I know a lot of people that have sold businesses versus owned income producing assets. And I can tell you who's always happier is the income producing asset people. Because if they live off their income from assets, and they still have some left over, they didn't lose any of their basis, their principal, the basic amount of wealth they have. And it keeps going up with whatever the difference is between what they spend and what they earn. The people that have an exit and sell a business and are sitting on a lump, like a 5 million, 50 million, 500 million, whatever it is, probably not 500 million, but certainly anything below. Gosh, I even met a guy worth 100 million and he still has that slight anxiety that when he spends money, he has to sell his stocks or deplete his treasure pile. Now, if the stock market's going up, that's fine. If the stock market, so it creates anxiety. So I still, in my opinion, cash wealth should be used to generate cash flow. Again, that's my strategy. I believe it's Warren Buffett's strategy, but it wasn't Bill Gates' strategy. It's not everybody's strategy. So what does cash flow look like? Well, we happen to be in real estate, and real estate is the best business in the world to build wealth. It's the most millionaires of all time have been in real estate. We're professionals in it. We're paid to be in it. And so the number one thing we should be doing in addition to serving our clients and building our practice, in my opinion, is investing in real estate. And that's the philosophy I took. So I have 0.5% of my wealth in the stock market. Basically, that's 401k stuff that I earned early that I've never messed with and I don't really pay attention to. And then I've got all the rest in real estate. You know, I've done some notes. Once you start on real estate, like I started with a single family rental in 1997 in Austin, Texas. And that was 20,000 down. That has now turned into 600,000 in wealth, 4 homes, and generating 4,000 a month gross in rent, net 2,800 a month in rent. So that's off 20 grand over 20 years. So that's an interesting little model that I kept separate for people. But in reality, I've just poured all my excess cash flow after so I make this money, I have living expenses, and all the rest I've always put into real estate. Or I've kept liquidity, or I put it into Keller Williams franchises. So I kind of went all in on Keller Williams for a long time.
So you either kept cash, you bought businesses, or you bought real estate. I mean, to simplify it. Is that right?
Yeah, and really, I think businesses are much higher risk. So if you want to get into that, yes. But I'm trying to think back to when I was starting, Caleb. And I think where I was starting is real estate. Just go into real estate, buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait is one of my favorite sayings that I picked up somewhere from someone along the way. Don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. Let your tenants pay it down for you. Now, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not going to blow your doors off. You won't be the next Bill Gates. But there's no question in my mind that everyone listening could triple, quadruple, quintuple their Social Security. So you could, you know, with a reasonable wealth building strategy through real estate, you should be pretty easily in 20 years get to 10 to 20,000 a month in income. You know, let's say 8 to 15 if you want to be more conservative, passive, free and clear above overhead in a 20-year period through real estate. And I know multiple people that have done it. So Tim Rode, one of my good buddies who didn't even finish high school, Pat Hyben, you know, who's like me, a college grad, but probably wasn't a stellar student, are 2 of my friends that are financially free through real estate. But then I know others, a policeman. I know there was a janitor that recently gave away $8 million, but that was through stock market. So that's not a good example. I knew a policeman that just bought homes. I knew an engineer that had bought 10 homes in his career and paid all 10 of them off. He never made more than like 100. He never made more than low 6 figures, let's say. And today he was living, at that time when I last talked to him, he had 120,000 a year free and clear, and he was working as a greeter at Disneyland because that's what he always wanted to do. That was his dream. We put him in the book. So yeah, real estate, that buying business is a whole new level of complexity. So I think in real estate deals, 8 to 9 out of 10 go well unless you're greedy or uneducated or overly hopeful, right? So I don't believe in buying on the come. I believe in buying assets that have proven cash flow, even with the leverage and the margin of safety, meaning for repairs, for vacancies and things like that. You know, businesses, I think 1 out of 10 make it. Now, maybe with franchises, it's 5 out of 10. So maybe, but then again, what does success mean? I knew a guy that had 6 Subway franchises, Subway, the sandwich shop. He netted 120,000 a year, 20,000 per store. And he kept having to go make sandwiches because a manager wouldn't show up, you know, or somebody would call in
kill
sick.
himself working tour down under.
Yeah, working a full day. He basically bought himself a job. So businesses, I think, are a great way to go. And if you want big wealth, it's businesses, startups, using sweat at a whole new level. But you don't have to go that way. The risk for that is massive, and that's fine. I mean, I like it. I'm not discouraging people, but if you want to use the simple, straightforward way, and it depends on your risk tolerance. As a kid, my risk tolerance was probably 10 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10, but certainly 10 out of 10. But if your risk tolerance is 4 or 5, just buy houses. I talked to a doctor in LA, and I said, I'm kind of forward and rude a little bit about this, but again, it's because it interests me so much about wealth. Most people never talk about it. And I said, what's your net worth? He goes, 1.6 million. I said, how much of that is in your house, your home? Because he only had 1 home. He goes, about half. I got 800,000 in equity in my home. And I said, why don't you own 2? I mean, he's in LA, he's a doctor. Would it cash flow? Probably not, but he's making $1.2 million a year. You could easily buy a second home, rent it out, maybe put very low leverage on it and let it appreciate. And that's not what they do. They don't think that way. They think cars and vacations. Oh, I have this excess cash. Every dollar you own should be 10 cents a year in income. If you think about it that way, every dollar you spend, you spend $5,000 on a trip, you just gave up $500 a year in income. That's kind of how I looked at it early. And I'm also not expecting people to be cheap and not live life. But I am suggesting that you just have to think in that terms. So, and I do that. I bought my wife an expensive $50,000 car, and I knew I was giving up $5,000 a year in income the day I bought her that car. And I'm fine with that. It's just a judgment case, happy wife versus more income. I wouldn't have made that decision in the first 15 years of my career.
Right.
I would have gotten something cheaper.
You're at a different place now than where you were there, or where you were 15 years ago. Let me ask you this. You're a freedom guy. So do you think that you would have freedom if you didn't own real estate or these assets that you're talking about?
Absolutely not. I do not see how that's possible. Now, when I was hitchhiking around the world for 2 years, I felt pretty free, and I was living on $20 a day. And that's been a value for me because it taught me that it's not all about money. But the reality is I remember finding an old journal in the middle of that, and I was reading it, and it said, man, I wish I just had a steady job and lived in the same place every day so I could take a shower in the same house every day. So as cool as it was traveling the world, I had the other side of the fence looked nice also, and now I'm on the other side of the fence. And I gave up 10 years of my life to build this freedom. Like I probably worked 20 years in 10. All I did was work for 10 years. And again, some people don't choose that either. But I don't know. And I know some people that have a great job and they love their weekends. My brother's kind of like that. Like he loves his weekends and he has a great job, makes good money, but he doesn't have the ambition that I had to be financially free, although he's done some real estate investing as well. So there's a lot of people like that. So it all depends who and what you fit. But for me, freedom means never having to work again for anybody. And I've achieved that goal. That doesn't mean I don't still kind of work hard because I enjoy it, Caleb, but it means I don't have to. And not having to really, it does take a little bit of the pressure off. Like I met a guy once and he said he'd hated his job for 20 years, but he'd done it to put food on the table. And I respected part of him and was disgusted by another part of him. You know what I mean? Like it's old school. So it's like grinding it out. I really respect that. I respect that you did that for your family. But another part of me, Matt, was like, man, couldn't you like try to think of another way? Like he was in the title business. He was the president of a title company. I'm like, you're in real estate too, man, just like me. You could buy 2 or 3 homes in Dallas, Fort Worth and let them pay. And I talked to a guy this morning I was coaching and he's like, he earns 150 or I think a year doing his job. And he really hates it and he wants to quit. But he's now got 6,000 a year in passive real estate, and he was asking me what he thought his next step should be. I said, you just keep doing what you're doing. He goes, I got a 5-year plan and I got to quit this job or I'm going to hate it forever. And I said, okay, get 6,000 more in 5 years. It's possible. It's not easy to do that, but you're at 12, 12, you're not quite at 150, but you're pretty darn close. And then you quit your job, even if you get to 10, because when you open up space for this space, more and more, as you know, because you and I have talked a lot, more and more deals show up, man. More and more things show up once you open up. And it's like in life, there's this river. And on one side is people who work for a living for their paycheck. And on the other side is financially free people. The river looks very stormy and rough. It's like a category 5 whitewater rafting river. But there is kind of a bridge across it. The bridge is kind of a rope bridge. It's a little tricky and it's kind of got some holes in it. But it's a bridge and it's not falling down. And if you walk across it, it's terrifying. That's like letting go of, the stock market and what your financial planner says and just going all in for your own personal wealth building through real estate and or businesses. Businesses are even more terrifying. There's more gaps in the bridge and it's a shakier bridge. But in real estate, it's there. And then you get to the other side and there's a bunch of guys there, right? They're all in our tribe of millionaires at GoBundance. And there's a bunch of guys there. And they're like yelling at the people on their side. It's not as scary as you think. Come on over. It's really cool over here. We don't have to answer to people. We get to do deals. We get to use our wits. We're fully alive and engaged in our economic future. But the guys on the other side are terrified. And it just, again, some of that's personality. Some of that's other things. Some of that might be prudence. Maybe it's very smart to not take those risks. But I will tell you, one of the reasons not to start, a business is 9 out of 10 fail. But not going into real estate is crazy because I think 8 out of 10 deals go well if you're prudent. Again, a lot of people are like, oh, I had a deal go bad. Yeah, you bought 8 condos in 2006 with no money down because the bank said you'd give the money and you went bankrupt. Of course you did. That's dumb. Put equity into a deal and be patient and let it run. Be the Ichiro Suzuki of business wealth generation, the all-time base hit leader. That's all I try to do is just base hit after base hit. And every time I've stretched for home runs, my batting average has dropped to 20% when I've invested in stupid stuff and stupid ideas and gotten excited that I was investing in the next Facebook. I let a guy use free rent for me for years and give me shares in his company. You know what those shares are worth? 0. I'd have been much better taking the base hit of him paying me rent. I mean, I don't know if they're worth 0. It's worse than 0. I got to wait for a K1 from the guy every year because he's still, barely surviving. If I just taken the rent and invested in more real estate, and I looked back over the last 10 years. So once I hit that wealth, I guess the last 7 years, 2013 to today, I had a lot coming in because everything had come back, my old stuff and my new stuff. So I started taking more risks, investing in more stupid stuff. And 80% of it hasn't paid off. I got 1 or 2 winners in there, but it's just not worth it, man. You just stick. And that's my biggest aha from the last 7 years is just stick with what got me there in the first place, which is single family rentals, which I love. I got a bunch of those, multifamily, industrial, retail's taking a beating, but I only have 1 retail. So I'm happy about that. And that retail is doing okay because we have an insurance company in there. They're still paying and some other guys, the restaurant's still paying. So it's just a small little retail, but office, I think, this year. but people always need a place to live. So in real estate, I think any kind of domicile like home is probably the best investment.
Can you, I loved your analogy of crossing the river.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you from, so you're saying like crossing that bridge, how long did you have to keep your head down? And you just blazed over it really fast, but it sounded like it was a decade's worth of sacrifice and working hard and investing in assets. But did I understand that correctly? Was it about a 10-year process of you crossing that bridge?
Yeah, and let me know if I have static. I'm hearing a little.
Yeah, you do a little bit. Is that you?
I think it's my headset. I think I wore it in the hot tub this morning. And it's wet while I was listening to a podcast. Is it better now?
No.
Okay.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay. All right, I'll try just without it. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, I think it's a 10-year process. I think it was 10 years, from 2000, from 1994 till about 2006. When 94, I got into real estate. 97, I got real serious about wealth building, but 94 was when I started work. And from 94 to about 2006, about 12 years, I think I worked, I work 60 to 70 hours a week. I know some people do 70 to 100 and they think that's child's play, but I just didn't have that kind of an engine. I've got a good, but not great engine. And I would start melting down. And I had, of course, weeks where I did 80 to 90 hours, but that wasn't my norm. And I know in like places like New York, they all do that. But my point is I took very little vacations. I would throw myself somewhere every year new and aggressive. Like I'd go whitewater rafting on the Zambezi, or I would go, do the Great Wall of China, just because that was my complete break. But I'd work I'd work all weekends. I'd probably take a weekend off a month. I put off having a family for a long time. I'm sure if I'd had kids at that earlier stage, and I do have one daughter, that's a long story from before, but from high school, but that's a long, long story and I'm not going to get into it. But if I'd been a dad back then, I don't think I'd have been as good a dad, because I absolutely do not believe in this philosophy if you have children. But for sure, those 12 years, I just worked, and I went, girlfriends would date me for a while and they'd say me or work. And I'd say, it's work.
Sure.
And it was just my drive for my life to get to freedom. And that's what I did. And now, do you have to do it that extreme? No, probably not. But you got to be committed for 10 years. Is there a smarter way to do it? There probably is. I mean, I learned the funny thing about working that hard is it took me 12 years to realize I didn't have to work that hard, Caleb, if that makes any sense. Now I work super focused and very much only on the top priorities, and I get more results. I may not get more done because I'm not working as many hours, but I get better results in way fewer hours, like 35 to 40 now, than I did when I was working 60 to 70. And I'm very focused. I take a lot more vacations, but I don't, it's like you're going to college, you're going to school, and if I can get 20 years of learning in 10, that's kind of the way I looked at it. I got a 20-year career out of 10 years.
Can you, okay. So it's 10 years, 67. I want people to hear this because that's what it takes to cross that bridge, right? So 60 to 70 hours a week, but then in those 60 to 70 hours a week, you weren't just grinding to build a lifestyle out of it. You were grinding it to build the life of getting across that river that you're talking about.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about that piece, that's my air game, ground game concept. So I was just thinking that as you were saying it. It's not just the hours. If you're just doing the hours, that means nothing. Doctors do the hours, lawyers do the hours, real estate agents do the hours. So you have to pop out of your life occasionally. That's all what I call ground game, which is just the grind and getting stuff done and earning your income. So for me, that was when I was selling, it was listings, buyer appointments, all the stuff we all do. But to get into the air game is to look over your life and say, okay, where do I want to be? It's just like that guy that was talking to me earlier today, who's a manager of a business making 150. He's like, I want freedom. How do I get there? So that's the first step. You got to ask that question. As soon as you ask that question, you kind of like elevate above your life for some second and you see it like a map. Like you're looking down on a map and you say, okay, where do I want to go? Because I can already see my destination. If I'm working 60 to 70 hours a week. And by the way, when I was recruiting a bunch of agents, I remember I was meeting this agent. She was a top agent in Dallas, and she just started crying in the middle of the interview. And I said, why are you crying? I'm so sorry. What did I do? I was a young guy, so I was kind of like shocked. She was probably 65 and I'm 28. And she just burst into tears based on the questions I was asking. She's like, I hate my job. I freaking hate it. But I got to do it because it's the only place I can make this money. Now she's 65. She'd been in the business for 30 or 40 years, right? If at some point in year 10, she'd come out of her world and realize, I don't really like listing appointments. I don't really like buyers. She could have said to herself, okay, so what's my strategy for getting out of this. And some people love it. My mom still sells real estate at 85. She loves it. You know, she's not as good as she was because she's the energy and all that, but she's still amazing and has huge, you know, huge integrity and love of her clients. So she loves it. There's both kinds, but even with her, you can still come out of it and say, oh, I love it, but wouldn't it be nice to have passive income? And so then that agent could have bought a house in Dallas. Like it, you know, in the long run, real estate always goes up. I mean, I would say always in the history of time. Of course, in 08, we had a weird deal where everything went down, which is very unusual. But in the long run, it always goes up. Even buying in Austin, which is massively overpriced. I bought an asset the other day, and I'm thinking in terms of 10 years. And what are the odds that in 10 years, a downtown house in Austin is worth less than today? It's almost zero. It's possible, but it's almost zero. So you put gravity in your favor, you put momentum in your favor. So coming out of your life and looking at it and saying, where do I want to get? So this manager's like, I hate my job. I got 6,000. I can't quit at 6,000 passive. What does it take to get to 10 or 12? Then I can quit my job. He's had his first baby. He's excited about that. So that's air game. Air game is coming out of your life. You only need to do that an hour a week. So 50 hours a year of you giving to yourself and looking like you go to a journaling place, you go to a Starbucks or buy a stream or something, and you just start writing down, what do I want out of life in 10 years? What I want from the future. So then you're driving and grinding, and you have a plan, like a flight plan for you to get to financial freedom. So yes, I did that very early. That came to me early. I don't know, you know, it was just always like, okay, I was lazily ambitious, if that makes any sense. So I was willing to work hard for the outcome of being able to be lazy if I chose to be. Does that make sense? So everything 100%. I did was designed towards free cash flow. And to this day, I mean, I'm sitting on a bunch of cash and I'm still looking at different opportunities. And in the part of me is just like, man, I should just go buy like a 6 cap, you know, single family portfolio that I'm looking at, leverage it up at 4.5. And then, you know, it's not a great return. It's 8 or 9. When I was younger, I chased much bigger returns, but it's just another several $100,000 a year passive. And, you know, it's not glorious, but it just adds to that kitty and adds to the overall like financial freedom that I have. And when I've got, you know, now you want to get into businesses, it's a whole different conversation. It's much better returns if you succeed. And I've taken my biggest losses and my biggest wins in businesses. But that's all about people. And that's a whole nother learning point. But for your agents that are out there every day, I know everyone listening at one point or other has gone into a house and thought this would be a great investment. And that's how I got my first one. And I know how I know that is I've asked that in groups and like 70% of the hands go up. If you ever walked into a house you were showing to a client and known in your head it would be a great investment, 70% of agents raise their hands approximately. And that's how I got my first one. I walked in, I loved it. I knew it was a great investment. I turned to my client and I said, hey, do you want to buy this house? And she said, no, I'm not interested in this one. I said, okay, great. I'm going to make an offer today. So I made an offer, bought that house for $77,000 in Austin, Texas with $20,000 down. And again, that turned into 4 rental properties that are now worth $600,000. I actually bought it for me first, lived in it for 2 years, then turned it into a rental and moved out because I didn't like mowing my own yard. So yeah, that's the journey that they should be following. And when you get that intuition, if you'll follow it and buy that house, you begin the journey. You'll make mistakes. You know, I had a house vacant for 6 months where I think my property manager was stealing the rent, but I'll never know. You know, you're going to make a ton of mistakes, but you get that knowledge and that wisdom. You're back at school, and then eventually you become really good at it. Like I look at more deals now in a year than I looked at those entire first 10 years. I do more deals in a year than I did in those entire 10 years. And I have a better team around me now than I ever had back then. A lot of really smart people that I've done a lot of business with that help me out in analysis, acquisition, management, all the rest of it. But that's, you know, that's a 20 plus year, you know, 94 till today. I don't know how many years that is. I hate adding it up because it keeps adding up to more. 25, 26 year journey of building that around me. Mm-hmm. People way underestimate what they can do in 10 years and way overestimate what they can do in 1 year. So.
Right. That I think, have you ever noticed, you talk about your air game, right? You step outside of your life, look down at like what you got going on and start building that flight plan of where you want to go. Have you ever noticed yourself? I know that when I do it, like sometimes I'll work in the day and then I'll look back on the day and I will strategically have gotten some of the things done on my flight plan that I didn't even consciously do. Like you train your brain, I mean, to take those steps. Do you ever notice anything like that? It's almost a spiritual thing to me, Caleb. It's almost a miracle. I mean, the amount of, when you make a decision on where you want to go, you know, Goethe, who is a playwright, I think he said something like, be bold because when you are, strange forces will come to your aid. The amount of things that have shown up for me by grace, not by my effort, but because I was headed in a certain direction in my life has been uncountable. I don't think I can go back and count them all, whether it was running real estate offices, investing in real estate, building a private equity firm,
even now trying to, I'm really committed to being a great dad, and the amount of resources that have been showing up for me in books and concepts and knowledge and the works of Byron Katie and so much is just incredible. I mean, it's amazing how, and yes, absolutely. I think once you commit on the path, these just doorways open up for you massively that you would never have seen.
What do you mean by commit? Like, we hear that a lot, but like, I would like the agents to actually hear what actually commitment looks like.
Commitment was something I really had to learn, because I felt like I was a procrastinator and I was flaky and I wanted to move on to the easy thing all the time, or the new thing, which is always easy because it's fresh. You spend 70, you learn 70% of it in the first few years, and that's the fun part. And then you spend the rest of your life learning the last 25%, and that's kind of a grind. Yeah, what was the question again?
Commit. Like, I want to hear from them, like, from a really successful dude, what is true commitment?
So I used to carry a commitment card around with me, like a plastic one, to remind myself, because I was bad at it. It's not like I wasn't that guy that was the quarterback of the high school football team that just life came easy to. I dominated high school. I was a nerd in high school. I was kind of a dork. But I carried that card. I was a procrastinator. I was lazily ambitious. I would occasionally have my moments where I did really well, and I got on the honor roll one year, but it was just because I was competing with my buddy. And then I never did it again. And then I had this card on commitment, and commitment is just, look, here's commitment. You can quit on Friday and say, I'm never doing this again. But on Monday, you get up and get back after it. That's commitment. Commitment doesn't mean you're like, Patton or something, and from that on, you're like, I hate to use Lance Armstrong, but that's what's coming to mind. Or let's say Tom Brady, and from then on, you were just the brilliant quarterback that never quit. It means you remind yourself when you get flaky and lost and procrastinate to get back on that horse of commitment. And commitment says, in 10 years, I'm going to own 25 real estate properties, and I'm going to have paid off 10 of them. And I'm committed to that vision. And then you remind yourself of that. And what do I have to do to break that down today? Well, I got to buy 1 property a year for the next 3 years, 2 properties a year for the next 3 years, and say 3 properties a year for the next 3 years after that. I don't know what that adds up to, but you get the general drift. And commitment is really, and I've gotten really good at it. And I have to remember, so today I'm massively committed, and I'm a very accountable person, but I was terrible at it 25 years ago. But what I found is by writing it down and reading it. I used to post it on my mirror where I brushed my teeth. I had a big whiteboard at the end of my bed where I'd written my key goals. And what I find is if you just remind your consciousness, to me, consciousness is like ivy that grows up a tree. If you lay out a trellis for it, that's the direction the ivy goes. If you put nothing, it just spreads all over the ground and it goes where it goes. So if you don't choose, you get what you get, and you don't get to throw a fit. But if you choose and you remind yourself what you chose, and you keep committing and getting back up on that horse even when you hate it. And by the way, you can be in a funk. You can go from funk to function. You can be whiny for a week. You can be whiny for a month. You can feel like life's unfair for a weekend. You can do whatever you want. But at some point, you see that paper that you wrote, you remember what you committed to, and you get back up on your horse and you keep driving towards that outcome. Maybe a deal goes bad. Maybe somebody steals money from you. Maybe the bank forecloses on you. Maybe something goes bad. It doesn't matter. And you can get down. I'm not suggesting it's about being a warrior that never gets down. You just got to at some point shake that off. And I think what really I've discovered about winning is the shorter you keep those funks, the further you go. And I think, funks, when I had an identity crisis, man, I think I was down for about 4 months. But I didn't quit on me. I went and did some internal work, mainly because I felt like I was having a mental breakdown. So I went and worked with therapists, and I went to a couple of seminars, and I came back from that new. And what I've learned about life is, and much more effective. And what I've learned from life is a lot of times the pain comes because you are not the man or the person you need to be. And you can either deny that pain or quit on the pain and yield, or you can look at yourself and make the changes that are necessary. And you end up a stronger person. And again, I'm really not implying that leads to perfection, because the flaws constantly show up, and it's a constant battle to improve your life, whether it's being a dad, fitness, being a good friend, or making money or building wealth. All of those things are contributing to society. But when life punches you in the face, it's usually because you led with your face and you did something that you shouldn't have done, or you operated in an ineffective manner. Occasionally it's just everybody gets it, like right now with COVID. But even now with COVID, the blessings to me have been incredible. I've spent more time with my wife. I've spent more time with my kids. I've realized that all that hectic travel I had weaved into my schedule was unnecessary. So when I come out of this, I'm going to stay home more. I'm going to do more Zoom, even though it's impersonal and not quite as effective as being in person. But what it does is it means in 4 hours, I can get done what I used to do in 7 hours, because I don't have to be in my car or on an airport or in an airplane driving from place to place. So yeah, there's so many, and that's the gift of this knockdown. And my favorite definition of COVID was somebody said, it's like God said, everyone go to your room and think about what you've been doing. And that's what's happened to all of us, right? And so that's the way life is. And if you're open to it and you use your awareness and you pay attention and you use that air game and you commit to that process, even with quitting all the time and procrastinating and all the ups and downs that come from it, I don't believe it's possible to fail. I don't believe it is, because I believe there's a divine force that actually wants you to have an abundant and blessed life. But most of us deny it to ourselves by either being ignorant of it, keeping our eyes closed, or being stubbornly committed to a stupid strategy.
Right. Absolutely. Well, David, you've been more than generous with your time. I appreciate you very much. I appreciate you spending time with us. We'll let you go. I'm going to give away some of your books, and we're going to talk about you now for the next 15, 20 minutes. So
it's been great being with you, Caleb. I'm a huge fan of you, man. I just really appreciate anyone that strives to make the world and their world and the world a better place. So thanks for having me on, and I wish everyone the best.
Thanks, David. See ya.
Bye.
All right, you guys, if you could unmute yourself, let's have a little bit of a mastermind. David he was being overly, what's the right word? Conservative with his achievements. I mean, the guy, he's wrote these books. He's connected with many investors. I think you got to see a little bit in his brain and the way his brain works. What'd you guys pick up? What'd you take away?
One of the things that really stood out to me was when he was talking about every dollar should net you 10 cents in income. So looking at, if you were making a purchase of anything, where can that money lead to building a more wealthy future? That was huge.
Yeah, and he's talking about accountability there, right? He's saying that dollar, I'm going to hold it accountable for 10. Like he's holding it accountable. He's talking about how he holds it accountable. Awesome. Thanks, Alex. What else?
I'm a big visual goal person. I love putting things on the wall, and I love when he just said you can go from funk to function, and seeing it every day is kind of like this growing invasive ivy in your mind, where it's, even if you're not believing it, just looking at it. I was just doing that when he was talking, looking over my goal board, just again, seeing what is it that I committed to at the beginning of this year. So I love that. And I love about that flight plan of what is my flight plan for getting over this bridge? What is the plan? I have yearly goals, I have life goals, but what is the plan to get there?
You guys, if there's anybody if anybody watches this and they say, well, I'm not sure what that means to commit, pick a flight plan. Laura, you do this all the time. Like I've seen yours. It's amazing. And you just constantly achieve milestones in your life. If you guys are wondering, and if you haven't ever done it, I challenge you to test it out. And what I mean by that is pick one topic, pick one thing that you want to have accomplished, whatever it is. Make it, and don't stretch yourself. Don't go, I want to run, a marathon if you've never ran before. Just pick one thing and commit to running around the block, but stretch yourself a little bit so it's not super easy. And just pick one thing and repeat that one thing. Put it on a flashcard, right? Put it on, label it like he did. Put it on your whiteboard, put it on your mirror, put it in your car, and just constantly be putting that message in front of your brain. If you've never done it before, and just pick one thing at this point, whether it's you've never saved $10,000 before to buy your first rental, like that's the only thing you talk about. That's the only thing that you put in front of your brain, and just start doing that, and just watch what happens. But here's the thing, though. Commitment, you guys heard him when he starts defining commitment. You don't stop putting that flashcard in front of your brain until you've accomplished whatever it was. His commitment was he was just going to do whatever it took, as long as it took, for however long it took to accomplish what was on his goal board, right? So don't go making 50 goals. Don't do, like, my brain doesn't work that way. Like, just pick one, commit to one thing, whatever it is, and just constantly put that flashcard in front of your brain. If you haven't done this exercise before, I highly encourage it. What else? Thanks, Laura. What else do you guys pick up?
Hey, Caleb. So,
Hey,
Laura was just talking, about what's that flight plan and that kind of thing. And you're talking about commitment. And, commitment is all about the way we think about things, whether we're going to move forward, whether we're not. Life happens, stuff happens to all of us, and what happens next is really based on a lot of how we think and how we've programmed ourselves and been programmed. And so much of that has to do with the people around us, the other people in our life, people that either build us and encourage us or people that hold us back. He talked a lot about, growing up, he was connected with Gary Keller and Mo Anderson as a kid. So even when he goes off and hitchhikes around the world and makes $20 a day scrapping whatever he did on the street, to make that money to be able to eat, that stuff was all ingrained in him already at a very young age, and he just returned to it later in life. And in Tribe of Millionaires, Alex Young, thank you very much. Alex had given me that book here about a month ago, and he talks in there about something called the influence effect, which is the effect that other people have and influence us in our life. And then we take that and we can spin it and we can say, yes, and in the same way, we are that influence in other people's lives. And I think it's just really powerful, even what you're doing here, Caleb, with the masterminds and, the idea that KW Green Bay is a place where wealth gets built and that the teaching is available and that kind of thing. Because it really is all about how we think about stuff, because we're all going to get knocked down over the course of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, in the Tribe of Millionaires, you guys, his first, I highly encourage you guys to read it. It's interesting. It's a good read. The influence effect, where he said, I want you to list out the 10 people you spend the most amount of time with in the book, and it'll make sense when you guys start reading. But a guy challenges the main character in the book, to write down all the 10 people he spends the most amount of time with. And then he said, okay, now that you wrote those down, write down their average salary per year, how much they make per year. And then at the bottom, I want you to write how much you make. And then he said, okay, now I want you to take the average of the 10. I want you to make the average of the 10. And sure enough, it was exactly how much he made. So who we surround ourselves with spiritually, who we surround ourselves with financially, who we surround ourselves with physically, right? All those things have an impact on us. He has David has formed a group called GoBundance, and inside of GoBundance, it's kind of like with that as like the backbone of it, where it's like, okay, we hang out with people that are going in the direction that we want in our life to have that influence effect. So what else?
I have a question on that.
Mm-hmm.
So Caleb, I know we always talk about that, who you spend the most time with. So I guess I'm thinking maybe a little bit too literal, but like I spend the most time with my children. I spend the most time with my grandma. I spend the most time with my team. You're not sitting down on the couch with Gary Keller every day, yet I'm assuming he might be on your list. How are you kind of defining that list?
So what I would great question, because you're absolutely right. But remember, wealth is not the only dimension of wellness, right? Family is one of the biggest dimensions of wellness. And yes, you do spend a lot of time with them, but you're also getting an average of love that you have with your family. So what you do is just make sure that when you go, okay, I'm going to go get financial advice, right? You go hang out with 10 people that you would trade financial pieces with. You're not going to talk to your kids about finances, right? In fact, you're going to try to take what you learned from those other 10 and then teach that to your children. So it's not necessarily that it has to be just for money, or yes, you spend time with your kids, but there's a whole nother influence that's happening inside of that other fact that's going on. But just challenge yourself and make sure that wherever you're trying to grow to, that you're jumping into groups. I mean, that's how I met David. I wanted to extend myself. I was jumping into a new group that I could learn from, and that we could, you just get around different types of people. And because most of them were big business owners, I said, well, I want to have a big business and a big life. So I attracted towards that group. Now, that's not the group I go to church with, if that makes sense. Awesome. What else?
One of the questions I was thinking as he was talking was how he schedules his calendar around growth, because obviously he has to put time into growing bigger than what he already is with his mindset and everything. And he actually touched base on that after I was thinking that question. He said he spends an hour a week on called it his air game hour. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, definitely read this. That and if you guys haven't done those exercises before, start real small with it. Pick a small thing that you go, okay, I'm not there yet, but I want to go there. Just pick that one little, whatever it is, and then make a commitment that you're going to go there. You're going to cross that river in whatever dimension it is, whether it's wealth or saving money or buying a first rental. Push yourself past that and work on your air game going, it'd be nice to own a rental. We'll start taking all the steps of crossing that river like you talked about. I think that's a great way of describing that. Thanks, Dan.